Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cruz In Action with Cruz Operations Center. This is Bill Acevedo, Product Manager for Cruz. In today's session, we're going to have a broad overview of the major features that are available within the software. This is going to border on possibly like a training session with a slightly deeper dive into each of these areas, so we can maybe explore a little bit deeper on how some of the features work. I'm going to start off today's demo. We're going to look at a high level at where how you can visualize your entire infrastructure, and then we're going to slowly narrow down to the specific features. And so what you see in this first page is our topology screen. And so once you discover all of your devices, they're going to show up in a topology like you see here. And so what we have imposed on the background here is an image, and those can easily be imposed by clicking on the Edit tab over here on the upper left, and it'll provide you some options on the screen to set various options, import an image or those sorts of things. You can change the opacity here. But the main thing is to note here is this is your personal image. It could be an office building, the floors in an office, a data center rack, a geographic location. You can simply move these around, and by clicking on the Save button in the middle here, you can save that image. And then by going over to this wrench icon, you have the capability to set your default view. And so just be aware that you can do that sort of thing. What we see on this page are some of the functionality that's available in our topology. Because we do discovery and we are pulling in all the links between devices, you'll see these sorts of relationships with the Ethernet links or BGP links or RIP links, whatever they are. And you'll see these different alarm levels for the links. And so black means no alarm, but you might have a critical alarm that will show up on your topology, or even for a device, it will change colors indicating some alarm level for that particular device. For any of those links or devices, you can simply right-click and bring up a details panel to deeper inspect the device and what might be going on there. You can go right into that alarm and see what types of events are happening on that device. And so you can also clear certain alarms, if you know it's not important. But you'll note here that what we're seeing are internal alarms, in this case, monitor target not reachable. That means that our performance monitor was turned on and pulling this device, and for some reason we're no longer able to pull it. So it's telling you internally that something we can no longer reach it, so something's probably an issue there. You can also receive events from the network, for example, a link down or that sort of thing, and that will also show up here. But you have the flexibility in here to select a link to get more details about a device or a specific device if you wanted to go that route. I'll just choose another one here and just show you some more capabilities. I don't have KPIs turned on for this, but you would see performance monitors here showing the various KPIs. You have all the information that you collect about a device, a reference tree showing all of the elements of that device, the monitors that are being monitored by that device. So you can turn on the ICMP monitor, various key metrics, but here you see a listing of the monitors that are active against that device. Power supplies and fans, and there's some different authentications that might be applicable to this device if they're appropriate for that device. On the network tab, you're going to see more detail about the devices, the network aspects, the ports, the interfaces, the VLANs, associated links. There are some right-click options if you need to interrogate those particular things in more detail, get performance or whatever it might be. We've solved the alarms tab. On the history tab, we're going to see audit trails, and these are basically all of the activities that have occurred within the software, and we're tracking those kind of things to even tell you who did things. And even if you right-click and get details from the job, you'll see even what IP address they did it from. But it's a way to track down various activities within your environment. If you have action scripts, you're going to see the execution history down here, and if you've done any backups, you're going to see those down in the latest configurations at the bottom. We can go into performance. If we're collecting performance on the device, this one doesn't have a lot of performance. Let me just see if I can find a little bit of a better one here. I'm going to search for this, and I'll show you how to search for some of these too. If you want to look for a particular device on your topology, you can simply just type in some key letters, words, and IP address and locate it. and I'm going to try to find a top of rack switch, which typically will have more information on it. So here's one here. I'm going to go into the details of that. Just maybe we can have a little more interesting information here. Yeah, so here you see we are monitoring a few things about this device, but back over to the Performance tab, we should have more information, and we do see various things about the various attributes that are being monitored. So you can see that fairly quickly, and then you can flip over to the top talkers if you want to see the top talker dashboard for that particular the interfaces on that particular device. And so there's a top talker. You'll see various things about information we're collecting from the SNMP interface monitor. We'll talk about that in more detail. And then on the maintenance side, you have the ability to drill in and create maintenance logs. And if there's certain things going on, you can add technicians and comments. And then these are reportable in a service report. We'll talk about warranty reporting too when we get over to the support assist, but you'll be able to see if we've collected it on the device, we'll be able to see the warranty information, the event, and we'll even get notifications on when those events will expire, those warranties will expire, and we can take some additional actions on that. Anyway, this is a high-level view at Topology. You can link views. I have one here that goes to one of my other views. My top of rack switches here. This is my basically a view of that. I can easily go back to another view just by double-clicking it and going back. But it's a way for you to structure your views if you need to pop in and out of certain views. Another thing to note on the Topology is we have these hierarchy views. And if you have a particularly large environment where you can't put thousands of devices, thousands of links on one page, then it's useful to have this hierarchy type of view. And what you can do is set out certain, we call these hierarchy nodes or container nodes, where you can group your devices. It could be by like location. We see here a bunch of location type things here. It could be by subnet, by device type. And what that allows you to do is come over to this tree and quickly see the highest alarm level in that area. So we'll see critical alarms here, and that's why they're all red here. By the way, all of these nodes and the grouping and how you're grouping is all controlled by this hierarchy view manager. This is where you can come in and set your hierarchy and who can see the nodes and what devices are included in. And for example, you set a filter of a certain subnet you want to include in that node. But what you can do here is if you have something defined, you can drill into a node, and as you can see here, there's multiple levels that you can have. And what it allows you to do is just see a focus topology for the items that are in that location. You can then do your right-click options. You can also impose background images on these too if you need to. But it gives you just a better way to hone in on a specific area versus looking at a giant screen and trying to manage stuff in a particular location. So that's the topology view at a high level. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to start across the top here in topology, and I'm going to go to the right here to the end and wrap back around to alarms and performance. So the next topic here is the resource manager. Once you discover devices, and actually I'll start on discovery. So let's have a little time here to dive into this. Discovery is generally, we use discovery profiles, and I will pull one in here as an example. To do your discovery, you're simply going to give your profile a name. There's various parameters here. You can leave this alone to do the most default discoveries. If you want to pick up ICMP only devices, you want to check the box down here. If you want to manage unclassified devices, meaning things that we may not have a driver for, you may want to select that, meaning it's only an SNMP device. You might not know that until you discover it and find out that, hey, it's not being detected properly. Come back and you can check that and rediscover. Various other options here. Some things to be aware of is that if you're in an environment that has no SNMP, you can actually select this option here, and we will attempt to go out and configure those target devices with SNMP so that we can communicate it, because that's the first step of discovery is checking through SNMP what kind of device it is. And so this is a best effort, and we have some pre-built scripts for the most popular drivers, and so it's very useful for environments where you may have hundreds of devices and there's no SNMP on any device in the network. You can come in here and say, oh, these are Cisco's in this particular profile, and let's go try to push those commands to configure Cisco with SNMP and then discover it. So you would just set something like that here. But for the most part, you can ignore these attributes. If you want to name the device a certain way, this is how it will be saved in the inventory manager. You can even manage by host name if you need to as well. So on the next tab here, we have the network, and this is where we're going to define what we want to put in here. Now we can put it in by a single IP address, and you'll notice here you can do comma delimited, dashes for ranges, /24 for a subnet, but you can also do it by a CIDR address. You can do it by IPv6 address. You can do it by subnet if you need to. And I'm going to pop out of this for a second. I just want to show you that you can also do this by list. So as I mentioned, you can do this by list as well. So you can just basically come in here and do execute with a file. And if you have a not even comma delimited, just a straight list of IPs, you can pass in that entire list to the profile, and it will discover those that way. So just jumping back into our profile here, what you're going to do is come into your network section. For the most part, your devices need just two simple protocols, SNMP. It could be V2 or V3. Again, this is the first step of discovery where it knows to go in and identify the device through the RFC 1213 sysobject ID. That's where it tells us what kind of model it is and what vendor. And once we know that, then we can pass it off to the Dell FTOS driver or the Dell DNOS driver or the Cisco driver, and then that's where the telnet will come in. When we start doing actions later, like file management, backup, restore, deploy, those things that require command line access, that's where the telnet is needed. But you can add multiple protocols here. You can add multiple SNMP or multiple telnet authentications, and it will go down the list and try them all until it finds the ones that work. So if you have a subnet that has multiple authentications, feel free to add more of those. There's a variety of other protocols that can be used for various things, but generally we're going to stick with the V1, V2, or V3. And for command line, you can use SSH, SSH V2. Generally try SSH V2 first, or telnet. If we're doing Windows discovery, we're going to use WebM, this WebM right here. If we're doing ESX, we're going to use HTTPS WebM. If we're using a Windows operating system that we're discovering, we're going to use the WMI. A new one that we'll talk about is Redfish. If you're going to discover your servers with iTrack, or it could be other servers that support Redfish. There's Cisco IMC, Lenovo XCC, and HP ILO. Those are all comparable things to the iDRAC for Power Edge servers. You would use Redfish, and you just simply give the root credentials in here, and then go discover those servers. So that's really all there is to it. Just identify your targets, add your credentials, and then the next step is you can go to this inspection tab. And once you kick this off, it's gonna actually go out and actually try those credentials across your network, and it'll give you little indicators on the left here saying it worked successfully, you're good to go, or it'll have a yellow triangle saying, oh, one of them worked, but maybe a few of them didn't work. And so you have an opportunity to click on those little icons, and it'll expand and tell you which ones didn't work. And so then you can go back and fix your network protocols, or your authentications that you put in here, until you get one that works. I recommend that on subnets because you don't want to go through, scan 1,000 devices and only to find out that your authentications didn't work. It's good to try those. So you would go through the inspection tab, and then you could just click execute, and it will go out and execute that against all those devices. You can also save this and execute it as a schedule if you need to. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to close this for now. So you would just basically kick that off. You can come back and you can execute the whole profile manually if you need to. All right, the next topic here. We're going to roll into the resource manager. A lot of the features we're going to talk about are also available through right-click options. I'm not going to go into the features here, but just know that you can right-click here. You can also multi-select and do various things depending. If you want to do a backup of a group of devices, simply select them, back it up, or restore. You can even deploy firmware this way, a variety of other options. I'm going to pick okay, so let me just pick this Dell F. Actually, I'm going to pick an N series device. Now I'll pick an S series. So you'll notice here that when I select the devices, you're going to see the interfaces portlet here, as well as the ports portlet down here below. populating with the interfaces for that device. So this is another way for you to just quickly get context of where you're at. So you can basically review which ports are active and those kind of things. You can do actions here from the top level actions, or a way to send a script to a device, either to do a show command or to put configuration on the box. You can also do these from the port level actions or from the interfaces. If you've created actions or there's some preceded here, you can run those actions that way. The nice thing is that if you have a script that you want to use, for example, to create a VLAN on 10 gig 148, you can simply just right-click it here, and it'll pick that into your action, so you don't have to type 10 gig Ethernet 148. And so it just basically will pick it up and put that into your script. A variety of other things in here, searching by IP and MAC address, and we have connected devices that will actually show all of the devices that it's detected that are connected to your network. So you can interrogate the remote MAC addresses and those kind of things. Okay, moving on to the configuration management. This is where we're going to do our file backup, restore, deploy. And so you simply come in here. Again, I'm going to start off with an S4 series. I could pick a device here, and you'll notice again that the configuration files populate as I select this device. So this whole dashboard is meant to be your configuration dashboard. You come in here to manage all things related to your configuration files. You'll notice that the columns here now are showing, firmware version, the last backup, next deploy. So you can kind of keep track of those things. Down below here, you have schedules for backup, restore, and deploy. The file servers, if you're using an external file server, are down here. If you need to add one or that kind of thing, you can pull those file servers in here. These are needed to stage those devices when we tell the device to copy its running config over to OMN, and we have to tell it where to put that file, and that typically goes on the file server. Okay, and so some very nice features in here on this configuration side is I can pick a couple of files here and just say compare selected. And so this is a good way to, if you're looking for some differences between a file maybe that got restored last night and a prior version, you can come in here and quickly see the differences between two files. So it gives you a little bit of a troubleshooting edge here. You can also come in here and you can edit one of these. And you'll notice I'm on version 17 over here, but I can come in here and quickly just say, find a reasonable attribute that I might update here. Maybe we can find. I don't see a description in here, but let's just say we want to put a description and call it test or something. So maybe I want to push that out to that interface, and I'm not sure the syntax is right there, but now you see I have a version 18. Of course, I can come in here real quick and compare those two selected files and see that I put that on that file. Now this file can be deployed to that box. So it's an easy way to push out configuration to devices as well. If you want to do it, basically a full config restore kind of thing, you can definitely do that. Now I want to also point out one of the newer features on the product is called basically I mentioned support for servers, and basically down to the BMC level, we can discover your server's iDRACs. And so what you're seeing here is all of your server iDRACs. And one of the nice things about these is they support, see if I have one here that I can use. Yeah, so for example, this iDRAC here, I'll pick one here that's actually responding. Not that I need that, but you'll see that I've actually backed up some files. Well, what are those? These are the server configuration files for those boxes. And I can basically do the same thing I did with the configuration files. I can go and view these, compare, whatever I need to do. And so these files basically, I'm just going to view one here for you to show you. It's basically, you can do it in XML format or JSON format. It's basically the entire configuration file. Now, you're seeing the whole file here. On these iDRACs, you have the ability to, when you back them up, to actually go into specific sections of that file and say, I only want the BIOS section, I only want the RAID section, or I only want the NIC section, and you can back those up. And the nice part about that is it also gives you the ability to restore that as well. Actually, let me kill that, and then I didn't really want to show, you don't necessarily need to see it backing up. So what I wanted to show you here was that when you do back it up, so what I wanted to show you here was that you do have some options here when you back up one of these. First of all of our backups, you can do add equipment group, by group or specific equipment. So you can come in here and customize this the way you want to, but you can back these up as JSON or XML. You can do you can determine how it's going to replace the tags when you do an export. Various things about the passwords, but here's the thing where you can set it to BIOS, IDRAC, NIC, or RAID. So you're only getting a specific section. So then you can actually modify that section and push that out to your switch, or even to make it into a template to push out to multiple switches. So kind of a nice little feature there to help keep your servers all in sync. And then down below here on the move a screen out of the way here. On the image repositories, where we're going to seed images for your devices. Now, we automatically seed Dell switch firmware, and so your firmware can easily be deployed by just saying deploy here, and then selecting your equipment again or your groups, adding it here, and then just clicking execute, and it will push that out to all your devices all at the same time. But with regard to servers, we can also import BIOS in here. So if you go up to the Dell site and you were to pull down a bundle or an executable that's appropriate for your server, you would just pull it in here to this image repository. You're just going to use this new option to pull it in, and once it's in here, then you can easily just push that out, just like you can with a firmware. So something to note. Those are some new things with the enhanced server management we have for the BMCs and the iDRACs and those kind of things. Okay, moving on to compliance. This is the ability to scan configuration files and basically ensure that they are in compliance with whatever criteria you might have. I'm going to see if I have a specific case here. Let's go back over here to this one here and just see if I can. It's a different demo, and I apologize for jumping around here. But so compliance is the area where, as I mentioned, you can create these policies, and just give you a quick view here. You can use some of our policies, but here's how you would create one. You would say new and create it like I've shown here. Give it a name. You can tell it what to scan. You can tell it to scan a device backup. You can tell it to scan a current config, a configuration label by date, and you can also do by an action. So if you were to do like a show run or show versions, you could scan the output of that. Here I'm saying do an output of show DNS. So it doesn't really matter that the fact is we're scanning a file. Generally, it's a configuration file, and this can also be the output or the configuration of a server. As I mentioned, you can scan for compliance. If you have specific BIOS settings, you could have that criteria here and just scan the devices back over the current configuration and make sure it's in compliance. But the main thing here is the criteria. You just simply come in here and just paste your criteria in here. It could be something as simple as these DNS settings, or it could be BIOS settings, or like I said, or some other setting, or a list of things. These can be very long sometimes if you want to look for certain things. It might be things on a switch to say make sure that Telnet is not on the device. Make sure SSH is configured. And so you would just simply paste that configuration in here, and it would scan the devices for that input. And if it failed, it's basically going to give you an event saying that your compliance policy failed. And what's going to happen is you're going to see an alarm here in your compliance window. You can take some action on that. You can email it to somebody or those kind of things. But more than likely, you can manually remediate. So you can also, here's an example of a manual remediation, and I'm going to show you how you can automatically remediate this as well. So we have our policy that fails. We have our action. We didn't talk about actions in detail here, but this one is just a script that goes out and pushes values back out to the box to fix a problem. So in this case, our script is just going to say the exact DNS settings we want in the box. So you could manually come in here and run this action and simply say, give it the target. You would execute it, and it would ask you what targets. You would specify your arrowhead number of devices, and it would go fix those. But you can do that automatically, which is the segue into the next section here. And by the way, these remediation actions are just actions. You're going to see them over here on the Actions tab called Actions. And so we're just going to run one of those actions and hook it into an automation rule to go and fix that problem automatically. We'll jump into that in just a minute here. But on this screen, you're also seeing other things related to compliance schedules. It's worth noting here, too, that compliance policies are sort of a change determination, drift detection on your configuration files. We have another level that's a little higher level And that's called our change determination process. And simply by enabling this rule down here, this scheduled item, it's going to go out on some interval and check all of your configurations and say, did this configuration change since the last time this process was run? And if it failed, it's going to also emit an event called a change determination event. It's not going to tell you what exactly changed, but it is going to tell you that the config file has changed. Again, you would see an alarm here, and then it would provoke you to go and interrogate that change if you're interested in why that changed. You could also wrap that into our automation we're going to talk about next, to go and email it to somebody or send it to ServiceNow or those kind of things. So let's just segue into automation and actions then, since we're talking about that process. Okay, so in this panel here, this is where we're going to deal with all of our automation in terms of setting things up. And this is all driven primarily by our automation event processing rules. And so what I'm going to show you here is a couple of things that we can typically do with these rules. There's two levels of automation. These first three are sort of what we would refer to as maybe a pre-processing type of automation, where before the event comes in, it's going to do this kind of checking on the event that comes in. And so one thing might be for syslog escalation. You can tell syslogs to come into the product, and you can then escalate those and say, I don't necessarily want them all. I just want specific syslogs. So with the escalation, it allows you to define the criteria that you want them to be persisted as an item in the alarm window inside of this product. The next one is stream-based. These are things like, how often does something happen? Maybe you don't want to be notified or get an event in the system until maybe it happens 5 times. When I see something happening 5 times, then persist it as an item in the alarm window. You might have a flutter situation. Maybe it's a link down, link up, link down, link up, link down. Maybe you don't want that to persist an event until it happens 10 times. Well, you can put that in here, that kind of thing. Or you maybe just want to override an event. Maybe it's coming from a certain subnet, or it's a certain alarm you don't care about. You can simply say reject it, meaning just don't even deal with it. Suppress it, meaning it'll show up in the event history, but you're not going to see it in the alarm window. You could reset the severity and say, if it was a major, make it a minor. If it's a low, make it a high, depending on what your conditions are. Or you can set it service affecting. That's a little more advanced. So anyway, those kind of things. The automation is where we want to talk about today. I'm going to actually show you a rule that I have here already, just so you get a feel for that case that I just described about the ArrowHive example automation. Again, that was DNS settings from a compliance policy, get checked, and if it passes or fails, we want to do something. And so the rule would say something like, we'd have filtering capabilities here to say, what is the event, first of all, that I want to trigger this automation on? In this case, it's a compliance failure, but this could be, again, a link up, a link down, anything that can come from the network. We can just simply add that event in here, and that will be a triggering event for this rule. You can have one or more here if you need to. Now, you can also, in addition, specify filter conditions, meaning maybe your rule, you want to be a little more specific and say only if it comes from a specific piece of equipment or from a specific IP address, or, there's a whole bunch of things in here you can specify about how this automation rule ultimately gets triggered. And these will change based on the var binds or the var binds of the event you've selected here. So in this case, we're saying when this compliance policy fails and the policy name is ArrowHive DNS Server compliance policy fails, then let's invoke our action. And our actions are 3 things here. We're going to send an email to notify somebody that, first of all, it failed. Second of all, we're going to run that same script I just showed you to restore those DNS settings. And then we're going to back up the device after we've restored it to make sure that things are in the state we expect it to be in. You could even run this again to check it again if you needed to. If it got fixed, it would not invoke this rule again, so you wouldn't have to worry about that. So that's kind of a high-level run-through on the automation rules. I'm going to dive a little bit here into actions to give you some idea of the scope and flexibility of actions. And so here's an example of let's see if I have one here for VLAN. So let's say we want to set a VLAN on a device, on an S3124 device. All you would really need to do here is come in here, create a new action. Again, provide it a name. provide some association to the types of device that it's applicable for, so that it won't run against the wrong devices. If you go to set it up on a wrong device, it'll at least flag you. But what you do is you come in and just simply put in the script that you want to run, and this can be just the same exact commands you would input as if you're on a PuTTY command line or some other command line, typing in the commands. In this case, we've added attributes around this so that you can allow the user to input entries. And so this can be executed in a couple of ways, and I'll show you that in a minute. But the attributes that I have here are all set on this attributes tab, and they can be strings, integers, booleans, whatever are needed in your script. And by the way, this could be a Perl script if you want to have a little more flexibility on how this gets executed. So we have some sample scripts that show that. Just query for the word sample, or maybe it's example. You might see examples of those if you want to look at those. But anyway, a simple script here with some attributes. One thing to, I guess, note here is that on the general tab here, you can execute this against various targets. And this just means the portlet within the product that you want to execute this from. So as we saw on the main page, we had the manage resources portlet. If you said manage resources, well, that means that from that top level device, you can right click and this action will be available. Or if you go to the ports portlet, you make it a port level. If you go to the ports portlet, it will be executable from that portlet. So that's just kind of basically dictating where it comes from. But let me just show you how this would be executed. If you were to do it from actions and not from those portlets, you would simply come here and say execute. And now it's giving you a full list of ports through the entire system. You're going to want to filter that down to specific equipment that's applicable here. And I think it was an S31. And so you'd want to find just the ports for that device. And so here's my devices. And so I want to pick one of these. And now it's showing me just the ports from those devices. And so now I can pick one of those here, or more, by the way. So this is a great way to do group operations and push a script to many different targets. But I'm just going to pick one here to show you what this looks like. And so here are my attributes of that script. I want to confine the user to use specific VLANs, and I have an IP address here. A couple things they can choose here, but then I can preview this and see the exact commands now. So you'll see that has my port in there, has my VLAN that I said, and so I can, if I were to click execute, it would push that to the box and configure it right there. So just to show you the alternate way to do this, I'm going to run over to my resources tab. And again, kind of do a similar thing here where I pick the device here, but this time, since that was a port level portlet, I'm going to go down to my ports for this device, and you'll see I have a variety of ports here. And I'm going to pick one here that's maybe like this one here. And I'm just going to say actions. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I'll talk about that one later, but actions. Go to my config tab, which is where that action is, set VLAN, pick it. And now I see I have the same exact UI. I pick my VLAN and IP, whatever I need here, and preview it. And so now what you see, though, is I didn't have to go hunting around for that interface. It was already populated on the screen. I just grabbed it, right-clicked, and did the action, and automatically took it from there. So it gives you an easier way to access the ports or actions from that level. It's worth noting here that not only can you do configure commands, you can do, again, the show commands. Config file generation is a way to do templates. There's actually two ways to do templates. We can go into other videos to talk about those in more detail. One is called a promote option. In this case here, what you do is you run an action where you basically cut and paste your entire config into a screen here, and you can put attributes around the things you want to put attributes on. And something would be like the management IP address. It's going to be different for each of your devices, so you can basically put that attribute in there at the management interface of wherever you need it in that config file. And then if you create that template, it's going to be a generic attribute. It's going to be equipment IP. But what will happen is when you execute it, it's not going to go to the device directly. It's going to basically push down a configuration to each device, and it's going to pre-populate it with that device's IP address for that attribute. So there's other attributes you can do in a similar way, but that's in a nutshell. We have more detailed videos on how to do those. And that configuration would show up in the configuration management screen, so you can just deploy it to the box in that templatized format. The promote option is another way. While I'm here, I guess I might as well talk about it, where you can pull in an image. Basically, it shows up in this image repository. It would say new firmware. Oops, sorry, new configuration image, and you could basically do a similar thing where you cut and paste your template in here, put attributes around it, and then from here you can deploy the image. It'll be as in the image repository as an image, and deploy that to multiple devices directly. So a couple of things there, and those are better left for more detailed videos. But at least you know that there's a couple of options to do that, and if you have questions, you know what to ask for. Okay, so back to the automations and actions. You can execute external executables, shell script, EXEs, whatever they are. You can go and execute those. You can create your own Perl script and execute it. One of the more recent ones is the Restful Web Service. So this is basically a way to write a JSON script. If you're familiar with a REST or JSON, you can write your own integration to a third-party or remote REST-capable service. And an example there is something like ServiceNow. We've actually done this already, and we've actually have automation rules. I didn't talk about those in automation, but we have an automation rule that will allow you to filter events and say you want all link downs to be forwarded to ServiceNow. The event processing rule would just say when that link up came in or link down came in, go ahead and push that up to ServiceNow by calling that action for ServiceNow. Let's just see if I have that. I may have that on my automation here. Let's just see if we can. Yeah, so here's a create ticket. And so in this case, I'm going to edit that. Basically, we're saying, in this case, it's a backup failure, but this could be linked down or whatever. But we're just saying, oh, call this action that is a ServiceNow creation. And it's just basically going to go log into ServiceNow. It's going to pull in all your ticket information and persist that in ServiceNow. You just need to provide the instance. And so that action is in here. Here's the create ticket. And so here's an example of a JSON script that is written to do that. And if you know JSON, this makes sense to you, not very complicated. Various attributes that go in here regarding how to log into ServiceNow and other things about the fields in ServiceNow. But that's really all we need to forward that up to ServiceNow. So that's an example of that REST action. Any third-party REST target can be, you can write a JSON script to do that too. So it's a very easy way to integrate. Okay, let's move on to reporting. We see a whole host of different reports in here. Reports are generally built off of templates. And just to give you an example here, I'm going to do an inventory report here. You'll see there's a variety of inventory reports here. I may have mentioned before that we have change reports, software change reports, inventory change reports, hardware asset reports. These are all preceded. The interesting one about the change report is that it will actually tell you differences between the config files and the changes it detected. So you'll get a snippet of the change. But anyway, you can run that if you needed to on whatever interval. But generally, the template is where you define. It's just what rows and columns are going to be in that particular report. And so you just come in here. You pick the source attributes. We precede them here. You provide the layout of the attributes. You can even do determine how to sort reports. Again, we have a whole separate video on how to do this, but you can come in here, and if you have some field you want to group on, you come in here and set, how to group the attribute, or if it's a calculatable field, how to calculate it, those kind of things. But once you have the report created, you're going to create any number of reports based on that. And so here's the one here based on the inventory asset report right there. You might create your own here, but you can come in here and give it a name. If you want to modify these, you can copy them, very easily modify them, but you can set filters on here. So rather than run an asset report on your thousands of devices in inventory, you may want to come in here and create a new filter on this, and just call this something, but then add some sort of filtering to what data you want to see. It could be maybe by a certain IP address, or IP address range, or something like that. And so you can basically create these filters and then have any number of these reports that are customized, and we just name your report based on whatever your filter is, and then you would just get an asset report in this case for that specific type of inventory. Your templates consist of comparison, table, or trend reports. Comparison is for comparing attributes and graphically seeing the data. Table report is just rows and columns, and then like the asset report. And then the trend template is more for time-sensitive data like performance or traffic flow reports. if you want to see those over time, you can dive into that, create those kind of templates. The settings tab is just a general administrative tab. And by the way, everything beyond settings here is just stuff that you're not going to see on normal product. These were set up for the demo or other things, except for the Nutanix console, which I'll briefly touch on here. But the settings tab is kind of an administrative area. You can come into the and see audit trails to see what audit activities have happened. The alarm definitions is where you can look at how all of your alarms are defined that are in the system. You can load new ones with the MIB loading feature. You can change your set behavior here. You can edit your events to change either the severity that comes in or the default behavior, whether it's an alarm or suppress or those kind of things. You can set the message templates on here. There's correlation, and again, these are for more advanced topics here. You can set correlation rules, blocking, clearing, and this is more of a root cause analysis process. You can even extend your what gets reported with these events by adding in these additional bindings that can be on here. So just be aware of that. var binds, again, that's left for more advanced discussion beyond today. I am going to touch on the Nutanix console, but I'm going to touch on that on another box that I believe has more data. The Nutanix console is I'm going to log in here, and you might see various logos here. Cruz, Cruz OC, it's OMNM is Cruz Operations Center. It's all the same. Open Managed Network Manager, it's all the same. So anyway, the Nutanix console is meant to manage large numbers of Nutanix clusters, and so we've set up this custom page here to help do that. And so what you're going to see is a topology layout of all your clusters at a high level, but you can drill into the locations of those clusters. It's the same tree that you use that we saw on the topology hierarchy. But as I look into, for example, California, I can drill in and see a specific node or a cluster, and I can actually see the nodes, the server nodes in that cluster. I can actually drill into the details of these to get more information, which will, maybe I'll show that in a minute here if we have time. But this whole page then starts getting context driven based on what's selected. And so you'll see here that all of the alarms in the events are all related to the cluster that I selected. So you get a quick snapshot of all the servers that are related. The cluster itself, you're seeing alerts from the cluster, or from the devices themselves, or even the top of rack switch alerts will show up in here. And down below here is what you see is the actual cluster name and the physical nodes associated with that cluster. We know the IDRACs here. In this case, it is Nutanix, so we're seeing the view that Nutanix have of these nodes. And so you'll see the node names here. These are the controller VMs for the Nutanix, but if I click on one of these servers, for example, the context changes a bit, and you'll notice that now I'm seeing the node for that server, and let's just see, so you're seeing actually the layout of that particular port up here. Down below here, we're seeing the network devices, the top of rack switches for this particular cluster, and you'll notice the virtual machines are also shown for that specific node. So as I switch here, you'll see the different VMs here. And so you can, with a simple right click, I can get performance details off of these, key metrics or whatever it is. Those devices, I can do the same thing from the bare metal or the iDRAC, TriDRAC level, come in here and get performance or various other things against that node. Same here with the Nutanix node itself. And down below, you'll see that it's context driven and giving us overall performance about the cluster. So you can vary what you see down here. Then there's actions you can run against the cluster itself. So it's a nice way to get a view of your entire cluster. That's a new feature that was introduced in version 8. That is an add-on feature, but it is in version 8. I'm going to wrap around here to alarms. We've talked about alarms and events. Again, any alarm can be, or syslog or event can be brought into the system. You're going to see them here in this screen. They can be external events, internal events. You're seeing monitor events here mostly. You have right-click options to do various things, to go in and interrogate that. Either the device itself, you can go and direct access to it, or see the details, or see the alarm details, show performance for the device, and a variety of other things. All of our portlets, I should mention, also have this plus sign over in the upper right. What you see here now is a summarized version, but all of the portlets have the ability to expand and give you a more detailed version. And this gives you some added capabilities. You'll have some additional portlets down below, but it gives you added capabilities to to filter. You may want to create a specific filter, like for on your alarms. Maybe you want to see specific things, so you can create that kind of a filter. And then once you do that, it'll show up here on the filters, and you can say, oh, I want to see my Nutanix alarms, and it's going to update your page to show just those alarms. And so you can easily come in here and create those simply by setting your filter criteria and saving it, and it will show up on that list. Or you can do quick search here to look for various things within the portlet. So anyway, just be aware of that extra functionality that may be available. One thing I didn't mention too, on all of our portlets, you have the ability to come in and adjust the columns. You can set the widths, the order, anything you want to. There's a whole bunch of attributes on each portlet, and it will vary. You can just modify this however you see fit. You can also come in here and set the default filter. If you want to enter this page and always have a certain filter, you can set that here. So just be aware of that. So that's the alarms page, performance. On the performance page, what we generally ask people to do is turn on a few key monitors when they first start up the application. If you do that, you're going to automatically start seeing various portlets in the application populate with data. And so you see here a variety of portlets. Someone's changed my sizing here. Normally they're all set to 5 here. But you're going to see various KPIs and interface data. So you're going to come in here and see CPU, top memory, top pings. So what it gives you is a quick dashboard to see, where you might have problems in your network or potential problems. Memory constrained devices, CPU constrained devices. If it's a network switch or even any switch with an interface, you can see the interface bandwidth, which ones are using the most. Received and transmitted bandwidth. You're going to see packet loss down here as we scroll down. You're going to see top interface errors, top input errors, output errors. So, this is kind of the first place you want to look when you want to say, why is my network slow, or if my network is slow, or any of these devices the culprit. And then there's right-click options from here to go and interrogate that interface or that device in more detail. So it's a nice way to just kind of give you a quick snapshot view of things. There's various other dashboards on here. See if I have one on this one. Just like I don't have any on that one. Normally that's the, maybe I have one on this demo over here. Yeah, oops. Sorry. So this is a Top Talker dashboard, just showing you basically the interface perspective. This is a lab environment, not a lot of data, but you would see the top talkers here in a graphical view, and then you can also create your own dashboards here. I'm going to actually jump back over to this one here, but you can actually create your own dashboards here. I don't know if I have an example we can show. Maybe on my demo here. Yeah, it's probably not one I want to show there. Just to show an example of a dashboard, you can pull these little portlets in and monitor whatever you want, really. I mean, it can be whatever you decide. This is average round trip time, hotspot temperature KPIs, but it really doesn't, if I have anything here for other demo. But anyway, you have a variety of graphs. You can do gauge or dials, gauge bars, those kind of things, just depending. One thing to note here, I didn't talk about much on our monitors. The monitors are managed from this monitor management tab over here. This is where that default interface monitor is set up. And this is where the KPIs are set up for CPU, memory, and temperature. If you want to do Windows monitoring, there's a WMI monitor here as well. But I'm going to point out this interface monitor here. It's going to give you an idea of how these monitors work. They all have this general same layout. So you would come into this screen here, and there's various attributes that you can set. No need to worry about these most of the time. The polling interval is something you may want to modify, but the main thing here is monitor options. And again, you can copy these monitors too and create your own custom monitors with your own groupings and those kind of things. But the default monitor is going to monitor all devices for all interfaces. And these attributes down below are the default attributes that we monitor. And so we picked a variety of things that we think are important. And you can actually add your own or browse the MIBS tree and pull in your own things to monitor. That's a very nice thing when you get to devices that you may not have. Maybe you only have SNMP access, like maybe an Oracle monitor. If you have SNMP on that, you can pull in Oracle MIBS and pull those in here and start monitoring things related to that Oracle database. But once you have those OIDs in here, We're going to gather raw metrics from these, but there's also calculated metrics. You can't always get all the data you need. And so here's the raw metrics are assigned letters, and then they're calculated down below, and you see the calculations. You can create your own if you need to, or modify them depending on the units you want to see and that kind of thing. But you'll see there's bandwidth, receive, utilization, all those things are calculated. The main point here too is that on these monitors, despite whatever you're monitoring, you can set thresholds on that data. And for example, you can just simply click add here, but we've seeded some here. But for example, utilization. You may want to have an event emitted. If you go above 90%, you may want a critical event emitted. You simply come in here and add that attribute and tell it what you want it to be, and so and then what level of event you want it to emit. And so it's very easy to set up, but you would be notified with an event. You can either have that just show up in the event window. You can have it automatically emailed to somebody. You can hook that into the automation to go perform some action on the network if it's depending on what it is. All those kind of things can be hooked into the automation, those events, so that you can, you don't have to sit here and look at the screen or look at the alarm screen waiting for an alarm. Conditions is similar to thresholds, but instead of being above, below, or between kind of thing, you can set your own conditions. And here's an example here where you might build up a condition to say, if these three things happen, then emit an event. In this case, but you want to say publish an event, and it's going to be a critical or whatever you want it to be. And it's going to be the same thing. You're going to get an event on that you can deal with that however you need to. I guess one last thing here on monitor management. There's one monitor that you should be aware of. It's called the ACLI monitor. That's a bit of a catch-all monitor where you can actually have an action script go out. That's why they call it an ACLI. It's an action command line monitor that will go out to a target. It could be a Linux box, a Windows box, a switch, and you can run some command. Maybe it's a rack admin command to an ESX or to an ESX CLI server to maybe show its VM performance, whatever it could be. But you could run that and then parse off that screen using a little bit of regex, a value. It might just be some value you can get on the screen, and then you can monitor that. Common case here is we actually seed some for application monitoring. We seed a URL monitor and an FTP monitor, so you can actually go out and query a remote URL. Maybe you want to monitor a Google site or your Dell.com site, and it will basically come back and with a value of is that site up or down, or if in the case of an FTP server, is that FTP server up or down. So that's a case of where you can use that kind of ACLI monitoring. We preceded the URL monitor for you, but that's one application of that particular type of monitor. The last thing I'm going to hit on here, I think in a lot of detail here, we're kind of running along, is the traffic flow analysis. Now, I'm actually going to see if I can find a box with a little bit better data on traffic flow, so that we can interrogate in a little more, with a little more data. Okay, this one might be okay. So, traffic flow, we can accept flows from IPFix, NetFlow, JFlow, CFlow. Any of those flows are acceptable. And once we start receiving data, we can start presenting them in these graphs. And by the way, on your devices, we do provide for some of the higher priority, higher quantity of devices, like Dell's and the FTOS and the Cisco's. We have some options, right-click menus right off of the Resource Manager that allows you to create and show the configuration. And so I'm going to wrap up in the end and tell you how to set those up. So just be aware that you can actually set those up on your devices to start sending data pretty easily. So in this case, we can see data by managed equipment and actually by the subcomponent that's exporting data. You can see the data by the application, by the protocol. You can see the conversation, which is where what two targets are talking the most, by specific endpoint, by which is sending the most data, receiving the most data. But the nice thing here is that you can drill into this data. And let's say you have applications, you want to know what's going on, who's using all this World Wide Web traffic. So you can double click into that and see what's going on over time. Basically gives you a representation here, but you can actually drill into this and say, well, what conversations are going on around this? And so it's going to update and say, oh, well, it looks like between this IP address and this IP address is where most of this traffic is coming from. So you can actually drill into that further if you need to, but it gives you some idea. And so I don't have any, this is coming from a simulator, so I don't have a ton of data here, but it gives you that kind of that breadcrumb to kind of look into your traffic. You can also take an IP address like this, 10.00.28, and go over to your search tab, your search button here, and search for 10.0.0.28. If you're suspecting that IP address of something, and it will come up with that listing there, or more if there's more here, and then you can look at graphs specific to that IP, and then you can say, oh, well, what else is going on here, and you can kind of interrogate that in more detail. This is just by exporter here, so anyway, it gives you that kind of flexibility. There's all kinds of options here around persisting the data, how you want to show it, how you want to report on it, the granularity of the data. If you want to see top 10, top 25 of data, those kind of things, snapshotting, data retention is all up here. And so it's quite a bit of functionality here. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap up on the home page. If you do, when you do start off with the product for the first time, recommend people come over to the home page, and this Getting Started portlet will show up here, and this is going to show you a variety of things. And actually, I'm going to jump over to probably a better example here, better home page here. This is the place where you'll see a few more options here. The Dell product will have integration with support assist and warranty reporting. I didn't really dive into this too much, but I'm going to talk about that now. Support Assist is an option where you can tell your switches to send Support Assist data to Dell, and then Dell can actually inform you about certain things going on with your devices. And then there's warranty reporting. This is also a process where if you allow it, we will take all the service tags that we've discovered, we'll correlate those to asset tags that we find up on the Dell database, and pull down all of your warranty information so that you can be alerted when your warranty is expiring or getting close. You would set this up here amongst other things like setting your mail, your file servers. If you want to upload image, your discovery, it'll walk you through a tutorial here. This is where you're going to set up Traffic Flow Analyzer. It'll walk you through the process of trying to create the configuration at the top level of a device and at the port level so that you'll start getting flow data. So this will be an important thing to walk through here. Which monitors to set up and how to enable them. It'll walk you through that. And a few other little things here. If you have OME, we have an integration with Open Manage Essentials. We don't yet have integration with Open Manage Enterprise, but that is in the works here. We're looking for customer feedback on how they would like to best integrate with that product. But you can pull in OME servers into this product, so you have them all in one single pane of glass. So just one last thing on the warranty reporting I wanted to point out is that you can go over to the Settings Support Assist page. And this is where you can kind of get insight into those service tags and asset tags that you have. And so I could pick a device here, just to give you an idea of how this works here. Go to the Details page. And what you're going to notice here on the Maintenance page, you're going to have a license. I guess I don't have one for that one. So despite being a lab, I do have some here that I think should have some data. And no dice on that one. Let me try one more here. That's kind of a nice little feature here. Maybe I'll try it from a different PC. Maybe that's my problem here. They've got the wrong demo system set up here. Try one, something like that, 4820. Go over to my maintenance and info. Yes, and so what we see here is on this page, it's going to have your status of your warranties. Now, you would have already been alerted to this. You would have an alarm 30 or 60 days out saying, hey, your warranty is expiring. But once you get that, you can easily come in here and you'll see that this link is built with the service tag in it. And this isn't going to show the right page here because it's probably not a valid service tag. It's a demo device, but it would actually put that service tag in the URL and take you right to that page with that service tag with the information about that device. So it's just a nice way for you to basically to get the customer to basically come back to Dell and update any kind of warranties that they may have or things that are close to expiring. So thought I would point that out. Also, if you're in the product, there are a lot of tutorials available from this product tutorials page, a lot of videos related to each of these items. Feel free to go in there and check those out. The last thing I guess I would touch on is the product is installable as a Windows package, as a Linux package, or as a .ova, which is basically a VMware Linux package. So, you can get this a variety of ways, and there are other options for doing distributed installs or even high availability. The general product is a standalone server, and that's what those packages are typically built with. But just be aware that there's other installation options for scaling. You can scale to very high numbers, very large environments if necessary. Okay, I want to thank you all for watching. I know that was a long video. It's tough to sit through some of these long ones, but I hope it was informative to you. And if you do have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us at the email address on the screen. Thanks again.